right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So we're going to take a break from politics this morning, sort of, and dig in on a little technology. When I say sort of course, there's always the concern of how the intransigent left infects certain technological developments and their effect on the conversation and the narrative generally. But this morning is less about the zeitgeist and more about the Deus Ex Machina. So let's dig in. And good morning. Let me adjust that camera just a hair. What is that weird blue glow? Okay, I don't know that I can do anything about that this morning, so we'll just roll with it. Maybe I need to turn down the brightness on one of these monitors. Anyway, good morning, everybody. I see Trish has first blood. Good morning. And I see Fish and Golf Pit, Danny, and Tim Lowry are with us this morning. And more importantly, on this particular morning, Uncle Steve is there, which, Waller, good morning, brother. Uncle Steve, Mom and Dad were in town the other day. When I say in town, Mom and Dad live about an hour and a half away, which is awesome and a little disheartening because I do miss having them right next door. But the farm is freaking fantastic, definitely worth the drive. But Uncle Steve and Mom and Dad were nearby the other day, and I missed y'all, and I hate that I missed y'all when you were over here. I'd have loved to have said hello, get some hugs and whatnot, but of course I was out busy shooting people with camera. Right? But, so I missed y'all, but Uncle Steve dropped off a Christmas present, and I have to confess, I may have peeked. That's awesome. So, as you all know, I have a bad habit, and that is I drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of coffee, and I've been using my number one dad mug a lot lately, because somebody dropped my favorite Hard Rock Cafe mug, and one of the reasons it was my favorite, not just because it's a large mug, but there's something about a certain proportionality, like, okay, so protect, attack, take naps. This is That's basically my mantra right there. But there's a certain something about large mugs and proportionality. I've had large mugs, large capacity mugs that were taller, and they're fine, but they're not as stable. I like the wide base large mugs. I can set it down and it doesn't tip over. It's much less likely to set on a jaunty angle and fail, or sitting working at my desk, if I set it on top of a pen, it still does okay. It doesn't just flop over and spill all over my electronics and, the wedding tackle. Never good to have a lap full of hot coffee in the morning. So, Tim Lowry says John Kerry has a large mug. He does, but just like I was just explaining, his large mug is wrong proportionally. It needs to be wider rather than taller. And if you set John Kerry down on a Sharpie, he'll make bad noises and spill secrets all over the floor. It's just how they operate. You know, Joe Biden's another great example. The motherfucker pointed at the football 3 times. Jesus. Right? And Obama, too. Long face. The man lost the biscuit. Some of you know what it means when I say the man lost the biscuit. And for those of you who don't know what it means, I'm just going to have to say y'all need to go look that one up. But Barack Obama twice lost the biscuit. In my book, that falls under treason. That, or at least utter dereliction of duty. So, anyway, what do we want to talk about this morning? I've got some articles pulled up about some stuff that is just mind-blowing and of particular interest to me in a few different ways. And that would be scientists built a functional computer with human brain tissue. So, I got a couple of things to throw at you to give you that background and context. One, my credentials on the subject. So, having been a bit of a spook and worked in the intelligence field, I have to be careful how far I go with this description, but understanding how things like voice recognition, confirming a voice against voice samples, things like that, there's a lot of how do I say this without spending the rest of my life in a federal prison? There's a lot of room for computers to grow there, I'll just say. And the way that those things work is complex. But one of the biggest, there have been 2 major barriers to development in the space of artificial intelligence. And that is when you're trying to replicate intelligence, which is itself a philosophically complex and ephemeral concept, right? What intelligence is. There's a lot of argument to be had over where the division is between intelligence and the ability to process information and the ability to store information. One of the biggest barriers to the development of what we broadly and very nebulously understand as the concept of intelligence, as far as building artificial intelligence systems, is that modern computers have to separate memory and processing, right? You have a CPU, a central processing unit. You have the random access memory, the RAM, where the data that's currently being processed is stored, and you have the storage media, the hard drive, the thumb drive, the CD-ROM, if you're old. Remember when the video game Doom first came out, and it was a 12 megabyte game, and it came on 4 CD-ROMs, and you had to delete operating systems to make room for it on your tiny little, hopefully math coprocessor enabled CPU? Yeah, no. The world is different now. But that dividing line between processing power and memory storage is a major bar between actual intelligence, human intelligence, and artificial intelligence. Waller says there's a significant difference between AI and machine learning, but in popular usage, there is no distinction. That is broadly correct. And I want to make some clarification there real quick as well. You're right. In popular usage, in colloquial, idiomatic usage, the terms AI and machine learning are functionally indistinguishable for the purpose of layman conversations. That said, the articles that we're going to look at this morning are a little more academic, and they will be drawing the distinction between artificial intelligence and machine learning. Hey, Maw's with us, and Sergeant Major too. Good morning. Love you guys. Thanks for joining us this morning. So, machine learning properly. Well, hold on. Let me go back. The other major barrier to entry for creating artificial intelligence is the ability of machine systems to handle visual processing. Right? There are some great apps out now that you can use for things like identifying plants, things like that. But those, they have to have, in order for one of those to operate, basically, they have to have multiple images of the object you're attempting to identify for a computer to compare against the photograph that you're entering into the system. It's not as if a system like that is not actually doing the way that your eyes do as a human, where you're able to pick out the individual characteristics of an object and understand the agglomerated whole of those and process through your human heuristics what it means for a thing to have enough characteristics in common with another thing for those things to be substantially similar as to arrive in the same category. That's a distinction that is very difficult to manage with machine learning. So another piece of credential for you, I worked on a project back in 2013 or 14 with one of the professors from the astronomy department at Clayton State University on a machine learning project where we took hundreds of thousands of images of galactic photography from the Hubble. And a problem that the scientific community has, an inconvenience at least, is that the Hubble takes so many photographs of various galactic bodies that it's difficult to parse through all of them as just a person looking at photographs. So prior to that project, if a scientist wanted to study galactic bodies and come to conclusions based on the observation of different types of galaxies, first he would have to manually categorize all of the individual images, which means hours of staring at a computer and saying, okay, that's a seven-armed spiral, that's a sombrero galaxy, that's a sombrero galaxy turning clockwise, that's a disk galaxy, and sit there and manually separate them into different folders so that he can then compare those images, and it's a pain in the ass. It's a lot of menial work that just consumes time, and even if as the scientist you're well funded enough to have an army of lab assistants to do the work, now all of a sudden you're kind of in the render phase where, okay, I've gathered this data and now I'm waiting for a computer or something like it to process that. So we worked on designing a machine learning program that could do that could take those images and categorize them and separate them out. And I had no idea what I was doing when I got asked to get involved in the project, and most of the work that I did on it was data entry work. I am not a computer scientist. But I worked on the project, and I learned a hell of a lot about how machine learning works. And the bulk of what machine learning does is it guesses and is wrong a lot. in order to generate the data for it to learn what the wrong answers are, in order to, by process of elimination, discover what right answers can be. And that goes back to the way that the human mind learns generally, right? As a small child, before you know anything really, you learn what is a cat, for example. And you don't learn what is a cat by simply being taught, oh, well, a cat is an animal. It has a tail, it has 4 legs, it has the ears. There is something that is commonly referred to about objects and entities generally in philosophical context as the thingness of an object, right? So a cat has a certain catness to it. An ephemeral, existential quality that defines its category. Better understand this. You don't teach a child what a cat is so much as you teach the child what everything else that is not a cat is in comparison to what a cat is. Because if I try to tell you what a dog is and what a cat is without showing you the two things and letting natural heuristics make some particular observations that are incredibly ephemeral and not represented well in the mere visual observation, then you have a 4-legged mammalian creature with a tail and large ears, right? Sharp teeth, big eye. They're identical. Every cat and every dog is identical in definition and description, with the exception of their size. But you get a cat and a dog that are the same size, and to describe them with language, unless you use either the word cat or the word dog to make the distinction, there is not a linguistic idiomatic distinction between the two objects. And that's one of the things that is very difficult to overcome for the heuristic introduction of information into a computer system for the purpose of visual and data processing within an artificial intelligence mainframe and infrastructure. So, the introduction of the human brain tissue takes one of those distinctions, one of those barriers to entry, which is the separation between memory and processing, and eliminates it. Right? Pit Danny says claws. Yes, observably cats have retractable claws and dogs do not. For the purpose of a verbal description that distinguishes the two of them, that's about all you get, is one has retractable claws. And even that, if I'm being honest, in observation is a difficult distinction to make, because of course you have to actually, like, you have to give a more close examination of the 2 feet to make that observation. But that's a good point, Danny. But that is just about the only significant non-ephemeral heuristic that you can list that distinguishes the two from one another, other than size. It's 7:48. Good God. So I'm gonna have to. I didn't even think about it. I'm gonna have to wrap this one up a little bit, because the photo shoot that I shut the show down early for yesterday canceled on my way there and rescheduled to this morning at 8:30. Also, fuck them. I just might be 10 or 15 minutes late. It's a vacant house anyway. Scientists built a functional computer with human brain tissue. One of the organoids in the experiment, and I love that language. There's no hint of the Repo Man in that at all. if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say the Repo Man, go check out either the film Repo Men with Jude Law and Forrest Whitaker, or if you're feeling real froggy, have a couple of drinks and go watch the original film, Repo the Genetic Opera, starring Anthony Stewart Head of Buffy the Vampire fame. It's it's a techno horror musical. It's absolutely brilliant cinema. There is no computer even remotely as powerful and complex as the human brain. The lumps of tissue ensconced in our skulls can process information at quantities and speeds that computing technology can barely touch. Key to the brain's success is the neuron's efficiency in serving as both a processor and memory device, in contrast to the physically separated units in most modern computing devices, like I was talking about a minute ago. Zydrate comes in a little glass vial. Oh! I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again. It's been a while. Okay. It's worth watching Repo the Genetic Opera, if for nothing else, but Anthony Stewart Head, the guy that played Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just happens to be an absolutely amazing, like, brilliant vocalist. He's a fantastic singer and makes for a very, very good film there. There have been many attempts to make computing more brain-like, but a new effort takes it all a step further by integrating real, actual human brain tissue with electronics. Now, if I understand it correctly, they used human neuro stem cells to grow a brain rather than just taking donors. It's called BrainAware. Woo. I'm sorry. I already read this article this morning, and that word BrainAware just... I'm getting images of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villain Krang wearing an ugly Christmas sweater. BrainAware! And it works. A team led by engineer Feng Guo of Indiana University, Bloomington, fed it tasks like speech recognition and nonlinear equation prediction. It was slightly less accurate than a pure hardware computer running on artificial intelligence, but the research demonstrates an important first step in a new kind of computer architecture. However, while Guo and his colleagues followed the ethics guidelines in the development of BrainAware, several researchers from Johns Hopkins University note in a related Nature Electronics. Oh, excuse me, guys. I got a little bit of hiccups going on there. Hold on just a second. Excuse me. However, while Guo and his colleagues followed the ethics guidelines in the development of BrainAware, several researchers from Johns Hopkins University note in a related Nature Electronics commentary the importance of keeping ethical considerations in mind while expanding the future. Okay, you didn't say anything there. As the sophistication of these organoid systems increases, it is critical for the community to examine the myriad of neuroethical issues that surround biocomputing systems incorporating human neural tissue. So, okay. I think I'd have to say that okay, so Waller says these efforts to biohack an AI advancement are efforts to address the philosophical failures of true AI. Yes. So the bioethical questions here, God, we're going to end up coming back to this. This is going to be an issue that comes up over and over again. So, eventually, there are going to have to be questions asked about where the line is between cyborg and augmented human. Musk's programs for Neuralink, which will introduce computers to the human brain, coupled with this idea of, or rather compared against, I suppose, this idea of introducing human brain material to computers in order to expand their capacity, there is a logical destination for those two processes to move toward one another and eventually intersect and maybe even pass one another. Which is to say that right now, what they're talking about is a system that is mostly computer with a little bit of human brain in it to help the computer work better. Now, theoretically, things like Neuralink will be used at first to do things like take a human brain that's in pretty good shape, but say lost his hands, and introduce advanced processing systems so that a set of robotic prostheses can be controlled directly by the brain, making them more effective and more useful. And now you've got a human, and this would be rightly called a cyborg, a cybernetic organism, with just a tiny little bit of computer in their brain to control their prosthetic systems, right? There's even some hope, some expectation. Xander says, isn't that the guy that played Giles? I didn't know he wrote the show. I don't think he wrote the show, Alex, but he plays the main repo guy in Repo the Genetic Opera, and he's just a fantastic singer. Anyway, so at this point we're talking about a little bit of brain in a computer, and that's an AI. And then on the other side, we're talking about a little bit of computer and a brain, and that's still a human being. And so the question eventually is going to have to become, how much computer can you put in a human brain before that stops being a human? And how much brain can you put in a computer before that starts being a human? Because there is going to eventually be the question of, where does the computer attain civil rights and where does the human lose them? Now, probably the prevailing argument will be that if they started as human and move across that line, that they never stop being human and they continue to retain those human rights. And that is a good argument. I'm not saying it's a correct argument. I'm not saying it's necessarily a winning argument, but it is a good argument, and that's going to go in the right direction. Thomas Waller says trans rights are human rights. I think you mean transformer rights are human rights, my man. But I would refer you in this conversation to science fiction works like the Bicentennial Man. The Bicentennial Man, in the film starring Robin Williams, it focused more on his development into a human being. And at first he's fully a robot, right? We're not even talking about a bionically enhanced machine, an organoid enhanced machine. We're talking about a fully mechanical, entirely steel and metal and silicon, probably some glass for the eyes, stuff like that, but entirely artificial entity. And over the course of the story of the Bicentennial Man, he invents and develops prosthetic organs, right? And that, I mentioned Repo Man a minute ago. That film's all about prosthetic organs, including prosthetic brains. But over time, he develops the prosthetic organs. He develops artificial dermis, skin, and replaces his own internals, replaces his own fully artificial systems with these hybrid artificial biological systems, until he has essentially transformed himself into a human. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this movie by now, it's too late. Eventually, what happens is he becomes essentially human, and then is declared by a court to be human, having contributed it, and part of that decision is a political decision honoring his extraordinary contribution to medicine over a 200-year lifespan of working as an artificial intelligence in the development of that artificial biological material and technology. And of course, a big part of that story starts with he's a robot. Robots are property. They're slaves. And he's granted freedom by his owners. And an important part of that story arc is what is done by the slave once he's granted freedom. If you haven't seen that film or read those books, go fix yourselves. It's good for you. It's good for the soul. Probably the only film that Robin Williams ever made that might make you cry as much or more than What Dreams May Come. But anyway, so this is a conversation that's going to require a lot more examination and philosophical conversation and debate, because the question of how much of your brain can be replaced by technology before you stop being human, and how much of your technology can be replaced with brain before it begins to become human. Right? Now, the things that they're talking about primarily in the bioethics and the neuroethics issues here, they have a lot more to do with the question of taking a donor brain and using parts of that versus the question of using stem cells to essentially clone brain material. I'd have to give that a lot of thought, but generally I think I have some serious ethical and moral problems with stem cells, but it's difficult to ignore the value of them. It's difficult to ignore the medical contributions of the use of stem cells. The biggest concern is, okay, before I opine further on this, I need to understand more about the sourcing of stem cells. I need to get my head around whether or not, because I don't have a good understanding of this, I need to get my head around whether or not stem cells can be reliably sourced without abortions. Because frankly, I can think of almost nothing for which the sacrifice of children is a viable and tolerable cost. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. I'm sure that if I stretched and flexed my brain on that question, I could come up with a good reason or two in extraordinary hypothetical situations. But I just need to get smarter on it. Uncle Steve says umbilical cord, and yeah, if that's the case, and I think that's correct. I think you're right. So if we could just harvest umbilical cords for it, then yeah, we're basically turning trash into gold. But that's a longer conversation that I don't have time to dig deep into now. These articles, I got this one from Science Alert. Here, I'll drop y'all the link for the article. Sergeant Major says, I think stem cells are good science. I agree. I believe stem cells are good science. However, there are, well, let's face it, a lot of scientists are fucking Democrats, and they're just happy to murder babies for any reason at all. And a lot of the original stem cell science was, hey, let's harvest some minorities. And, right, as long as you can do it like that, as long as you can do it without harvesting children, I'm good. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin in it right there. I gotta get out the door. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.